Hello, hello, hello. Hope you are doing great today. Thanks for joining for yet another live event where we unpack multifamily underwriting and due diligence one step at a time. Today's topic is near and dear to my heart and one that I feel is very often overlooked by investors, especially passive investors, and namely vetting the operator. Oftentimes, people ask me about my process on deal analysis, and yes, of course, I do a deep dive in the numbers, and we've covered bits and pieces of that process and prior live events. So, of course, that is important. But actually, the very first step where I start is doing deep diligence on the operator, the team that will be running the day to day operations on the deal, executing on the business plan. And that's something that I feel a lot of people kind of gloss over. Then we've talked about the market, right, which is the second pillar, and really the deal, the numbers, that's the easy part, that's the technical part. So there's been a lot happening in our industry over the past couple of years, and I had recent conversations with investors, which is what makes this um, live event even more relevant now than ever. But before we dive in, for those who don't know me or maybe are tuning in for the first time, my name is Vessi Kapulian. I'm a former commercial lender turned real estate investor. I invest actively in apartments today, and I also help connect high net worth individuals and high achieving professionals to well vetted cash flowing investments in real estate. I also help investors, active or passive, with the deal diligence and vetting process. And for those willing to do a deeper dive, I also have a community that comes with a self paced course where I help investors learn how to underwrite a deal from beginning to end so they can confidently sift through the packages and investment offerings that come their way. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And Oh, thanks, Shane. Thanks for joining in. I just saw there's a bit of a lag between the stream platform that I am using and the comments, but I appreciate you joining in today. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I'll focus on today are four key areas that I personally look at and highlight a couple of the key points there. Of course, the vetting and the due diligence process is a lot deeper than that. But my goal is that you can walk away with at least one, hopefully four actionable strategies that you can apply within your own due diligence process today as you become a more educated and empowered investor. And so, first of all, I'd like to understand beyond their bio who the sponsor is and who really the operating team is, what their background is. Ideally, speak with them in person. I did a live event recently on AI, and of course, there are a lot of benefits with AI, and it's here to stay. But one of the risks with it, and I do think we are officially in or have entered an authenticity recession, right? And there are people out there with bad intentions who may impersonate well-known figures and potentially scam you for money. So ideally, you want to meet with them in person, if not at a minimum, maybe over Zoom, and and connect with investors who have perhaps spoken to them. But that in-person interaction, I think, is key, and ongoing interaction, so you get to know them over time and don't just rush into the deal because it's the next best shiny object presented to them. Understand their background. Are they really experts in the area, or are they hopping around from market to market, from asset class to asset class? And if they are, who are the experts on their team that have the years and the institutional expertise to give you the confidence that they can execute on the business plan and run on the investment. A lot of people talk about track record, and of course, that's not a guarantee for future performance. But for those of us who have been in the industry long enough, remember the 0809 cycle, and multifamily really bottomed out around 2010, 2011, so just a couple years later. And it's been on an upswing since then to up until 2021. And so anyone also during that period of time, interest rates were going down, cap rates were compressing. So even if you messed up in terms of operations and maybe you did not deliver the NOI or net operating income that you initially projected or initially targeted, the market bailed you out. And so a lot of people did great, did phenomenal during that market, and especially the last couple of years of the boom cycle, where it was a game of literally musical chairs that was happening, where deals were trading every 1, 2, maximum 3 years. That is not the case any longer. So you really want to dig deep into that track record and see how did their NOI perform in reality, in actuality, relative to their original projections. And of course, I'm not looking for perfection. I wouldn't advise you to look for perfection, but you could probably gauge some pretty good patterns, right? If 9 of their 10 deals perform below projections, the question to ask is, well, why do you think this latest deal, number 11, is going to knock it out of the ballpark, right? What is different this time? And then first time is another red flag. Is it first time in the market? Maybe first time they're doing a tax abatement, first time they're expanding into another asset class. Personally, I would want to see how that first time transition goes around, or maybe first time partnering with a or joining hands with a large partner. You want to see how that all plays out, because inherently, as in business, right, there are a lot of risks with those first time transitions, and you don't necessarily want to be the guinea pig of that. Um, Secondly, sponsor transparency and communication is key. I spoke to an investor not too long ago where the deal didn't perform according to projection, but the sponsor was overly communicative, and they ended up investing with that sponsor again. Why? Because they didn't hide information, they didn't sugarcoat information, they were transparent throughout. And that's something that I'm an advocate of. Face the dragon, right? Face to face. Don't be afraid. And to the extent you have bad news, you want to deliver those early, not surprise people. I am a passive investor myself, and unfortunately, not too long ago, I got the email noting, hey, our distributions will be paused this month. And it came with the monthly update, no advance notice, nothing. And so you don't want that to be as a surprise. Now, I do follow my investments very closely, so I knew that was probably coming. And in fact, I was surprised as to why they didn't do it sooner, but I guess they finally faced reality. So it wasn't a total surprise to me in that particular example, but only because I was reading in detail all the financial updates. Not all passive investors do. So you don't want to sandwich the bad news. You don't want to put them in the end of your communication. Put them up front and center so people are aware up front. Be very transparent when answering questions, and if they're not willing to engage during the courtship, right, stage of the uh, investment cycle, that is before you invest in the deal, what makes you think that they'll be responsive after you wire the money and after you enter the deal? Now, one question I often get asked is, well, Leslie, how do I know how they'll behave if I'm not even in the deal? Well, two ways, and that will actually bring me to my third point. First, ask for sample of their communication so you can see the reporting package. Does it satisfy your desired level of detail? If not, maybe that's a reason to walk away. If it does, you also want to talk to investors, current and past, and get references to get a second set of eyes, if you will, in terms of how communications with that particular team went, how transparent, frequent, and open they are, and even have them walk you through a situation where they faced a challenge. I promise you, this business is not rainbows and butterflies. It's not a matter of if, but when things go wrong when you acquire a deal, whether you own it for a year or 3 years or 10 years, things do go wrong. So have them walk you through a challenge and obstacles maybe that they hit along the way, how they resolved it, and how did they communicate to investors about it. Now, I did mention references, and so sponsor alignment and background checks are extremely important. I did mention references and speaking to current and past investors, and a lot of times one of the pushbacks I get is, well, if you ask for references, just like a job reference, right? They'll only give you the glorious ones. They'll never connect you with an investor who had a bad experience, and that's a fair comment, but you never know what you uncover in those conversations. Maybe something that wasn't as relevant to that particular investor is relevant to you, and maybe it will cause you to pause and walk away. You can also ask, when you speak to that investor, you can ask to see if they know somebody else that they'll be willing to connect you with. And there are sometimes very good reasons why people don't reinvest. Maybe they run out of money, right? None of us have infinite amount of liquidity coming our way at all times. So at some point, people run out of liquidity. At other times, they may want to diversify across different sponsors, and so they're capped in terms of their allocation to that particular sponsor. Maybe the timing wasn't right? So there could be very uh, good reasons why they didn't reinvest in a subsequent deal, but maybe there are more substantive reasons also why they didn't do it, and you're not going to uncover that. Sometimes in public forums you may, although there was the case where an LP, unfortunately, that goes back to my communication principle, wasn't hearing back from their sponsor. They posted on a well-known platform. An experienced or seasoned investor offered to help them out. He got the address of the property, only to find out that it was getting foreclosed on, and they had never heard a word from their sponsor. Now, you can imagine what kind of discussion that started on the public forum, and finally the alleged sponsor chimed in, but instead of approaching the situation with humility, they threatened the LP with a defamation lawsuit, which these things do happen as well. And so, again, transparency, communication, getting those references from other investors, and a lot of times could be people that you know directly, and oftentimes in those public forums and communities, like Invest Clearly is another site that you can go to check on sponsor references. Now, the other point I would like to make, which is very important, comes to the sponsor background checks. And if you do the bare minimum, then go to those online sites that offer the quick $50 background checks, and at least you'll get something which is better than nothing. And maybe there will be information there that will cause you to pause and take a step back if you see something of concern. But what I personally like to do is do deeper diligence through a private investigator firm. And actually, he's on the call today, so I'll give a shout out to Shane Pogue and Aegis RSI. And I'm happy to connect you guys directly if you need a referral or a reference. But during that deeper dive, you can uncover a lot more detailed information that may be missed during those quick online checks, as well as eliminate any false positives, which are not at all uncommon. And I can tell you that from my days as a former commercial lender. But if you put things in perspective, oftentimes you are investing six figures into these deals, sometimes even more, or at a minimum five figures, right? The minimum investments is typically 50 to 75K, but oftentimes 100K or more. And so to spend a couple $1,000s on diligence, which could include getting the background check, and then also hiring a second set of eyes to review the deal and review the numbers for you. And that's, by the way, a service that I also offer for offering reviewing the investment offerings and helping active or passive investors. And I've spoken about that during previous live events. So if you'd like to learn more, simply send me a DM. But the return on investment or the return on risk is huge, right? That couple $1,000 is an investment that protects your capital, protects your principal, and God forbid, the last thing you want to do is find out about poor uh, background checks or issues that the sponsor had after you're in the deal. At that point, it's too late. So take the time up front to to do that deeper diligence, get the background checks of the not just the company and the syndication company, but the sponsor and the key members of the team, right? Because if these are all key decision makers, you want to make sure all of them are well vetted. And last but not least is the sponsor alignment, and that typically manifests this way in two ways. One is the fee structure, and then also um, the promote that they charge. Now, you don't want to be on the extreme ends of the spectrum, right, where they're taking on a bunch of fees, right, that effectively suggests that they're getting paid or collecting most of the money up front, right? And then there isn't real incentive to keep running the deal if something was to go wrong. But you also don't want to be on the other end of the spectrum where the deal is so thin that they're basically working for free. And like I said, it's not a matter of if, but when things go wrong, you want them to hustle and work hard to push through that challenge, save the deal. And if they're not getting compensated or paid for it, there's little incentive to do that. And so, what I look for, apart from fee structure being within the market parameters, is their skin in the game. And typically, that ranges anywhere from 5 to 10%. And I wish I could tell you there's more science to it, but there really isn't, right? For a larger deal, say like a $20 million deal, a $40 million deal where they're raising $20 million of capital, 10% co-invest will be $2 million, which is a pretty substantial sum. So in that case, it may be the investment may be on the lower end of the spectrum, maybe 5 to 8%, closer to the 5% range. And then for a smaller deal that's maybe is 10 million, maybe you're raising 5, then yeah, it's not uncommon to expect the co-invest to be closer to the 10% of the range. So obviously that varies based on the deal size, and sometimes especially in the current environment, often lenders want to see a pretty substantial co-invest amount. So sometimes that would be even forced by the lender because they want that skin in the game. Signing on the loan is another way, not necessarily monetary in nature, especially if you're doing a non-recourse credit facility, but they are putting their reputation on the line. So if they do mess up, right, they could end up on the lender's blacklist. So, which then pretty much destroys their ability to get any loans or credit. So that in and of itself is another incentive to quote unquote behave. I'll leave you with these points: is the communication, the sponsor alignment and background checks, and getting a really good read on their performance track record and really peeling the onion there. These would be the three key points that I would focus on. So what questions do you guys have? Let me check the chat, make sure I don't miss anything. Oh, thanks, Lanai. Appreciate the kind words and the support. Thank you for joining live. So, okay, so I think we're good. One question that often comes up is, where do I meet these sponsors? Well, yes, there's a lot in today's day and age. You can connect with a lot of them on social media, but that's a double-edged sword. That's another pet peeve of mine. Just because someone has a prolific social media presence does not necessarily mean that they're a strong operator. In fact, a lot of strong operators don't like to be on social media, right? They roll up their sleeves and they're doing the work. They're not necessarily out there doing a ton of marketing and sales, but maybe capital partners could be out there, fund managers could be out there. So you want to make sure that they really have a well structured, deep due diligence process in place. And so um, just because they're really good at marketing and sales doesn't necessarily mean they're strong at operations, or that they have that process. And a lot of that you learn over time as you have those conversations, as you go through those in-depth discussions. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because the time to ask those is up front, right? Before you get married, before you enter the deal, not after. After that, it would be too late. So if you do need help with vetting an investment opportunity, like I briefly mentioned, I help investors with the process. And for those willing to do a deeper dive, you're welcome to send me a DM on how you can join the Mastering Multifamily Underwriting community. I also help seasoned investors to the extent they're building or forming a team, train their underwriter on how to vet a multifamily deal. So all that to say that there are a lot of different ways that I can help you to protect your capital and vet deals with confidence and ease, as I'd like to create educated and empowered investors. And if you'd like to join future live events, follow me on LinkedIn and YouTube so you could get notified and directly. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would greatly appreciate it if you do, because that helps a lot of other people reach the content and get exposed to the content. And of course, it will help you as well. I have a ton of complimentary educational videos there that will help you and serve you. And with all that, I wish you a blessed Tuesday and a great day. Ciao.